concern about children in this context is that their parents should not be arrested. The idea that there are medications that work with pediatric conditions, as in these horrible situations where babies have seizures every few minutes from the time they're born, and how they and their parents survive is beyond my comprehension. I think that under the circumstances, arresting them would not be in the best interest of the children. Well, that seems absurd to say, but except that has always, up until very recently, has been the policy of the United States and the United Kingdom and other places as well. What do you do when you have a sick child, whatever the condition is not responding to standard medicines? Obviously, parents would do anything to help their children, including risking arrest, including risking having their child taken away from them by Child Protective Services. This is both a medical problem and a philosophical problem, in the sense that it really does raise very fundamental questions about the relationship of parents and their children. And on the other hand, you don't want parents who are crazy abusing their child in the name of protecting them. Recently ran into this thing, for example, of when parents refuse to get their children vaccinated because they read on the internet that somebody said they're getting vaccinated, and they had proof right there, because they don't put things on the internet unless it's true. This is a very complex problem that we have to deal with. But the key part about dealing with this is to deal with it, don't want to sound too controversial, but deal with it honestly. That we haven't dealt with any of the aspects of cannabis honestly. And that it is horrible to threaten the parents of a sick child with prison for using CBD. It's horrible to, I think of a phone call I got one time from a woman whose elderly father was going through cancer chemo and vomiting nonstop, until somebody suggested that they try marijuana, and they did, and he stopped vomiting and felt much better. And so she was calling me, it happened to be the National Director of Normal at the time, because she wanted to ask me how much danger there was of him dying of an overdose. Think about that in the context of the opposite ends of life. That you have a parent watching a baby suffer. You have a grown, elderly daughter watching her father suffer. What do these two things have in common? Totally different diseases at totally different, opposite ends of life. What they have in common is the lies that have been told about cannabis, and which are still a part of United States government policy. It's still a part of the Trump administration, as it was the Obama administration. Those people who like to talk about Ronald Reagan and freedom, it was a part of that. It was a part of the world where George H.W. Bush was a real gentleman and a great American and a war hero, but the lie was a part of that. People identify George W. Bush with the lies that got us into Iraq, but they don't involve the lies that were told that were justified the arrest of 1 million Americans while he was president. Oh, and of course Barack Obama, who always stood up, really brought the reality of African American life to the American Republic and made us aware of the injustices that have fallen on African Americans. And then we continued arresting young African Americans for possession of marijuana, hundreds of thousands, while our very cool president was being cool. And now we have a president who denounces conspiracies, who thought that Jeff Sessions was a disastrous attorney general, and who is contemptuous of authority generally, and who wants to continue marijuana prohibition. So what do all of these people, Richard Nixon and Barack Obama, what is it that they have in common? Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump, what do they have in common? What does the woman whose father is dying of cancer and the parent whose child is having endless seizures have in common? Marijuana prohibition, but let's not talk about it.